vision. And then it can cover. So that what I saw earlier was comprehensive. It was like. Yeah. Show you. I wish I could see.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Great.
Any new quieter people are here for Delaware. My name is Jimmy Sprigg, I'm the director of the AFWERX Small Business Hub, work for Wright Brothers Institute. You are in the Wright Brothers Institute for facility. We have 3 facilities around 8. And this is primarily where I have my gliders at. So we'll have about 100+ people on virtually too. So they're listening in and saying, also, I just want to make you aware that drop mics are live. Okay, so when you ask a question, you will be heard from, in virtual land. If you're chit-chatting, you'll be heard in virtual land too, okay? So just want to let everybody know that. Don't say anything bad about Jeff when he can't talk. I'm happy to have everybody here today for the FOCI collider. It's going to be SWIAC. Have we ever had a FOCI collider?
No, this is our first on.
Yeah,
We've
right.
had one previously on SCRM.
Yes, exactly. Yes, sir. So we'll get this thing going. And then one last thing is I always have to make this comment: parking. Hope nobody parked right behind us here across the alley. If you did, please move your car as soon as possible. Okay, good. All right, good. And with that, I'm gonna one more. After this event, we always have a little networking event. Taking your company, if you'd like to join us, whatever, you're more than welcome to do that. It's not optional, so you're welcome to join us. All right, take it from Jeff.
Welcome everybody in the room and online virtually. For questions, for those online, you're just going to type those what in the Q&A or in the chat?
Q&A.
Q&A. Just raise your hand in the moment, and the speaker will, get to you as they can. Anyway, so I saw that we did have, several of these in the room. This is their first glider with Wright Brothers Institute, and then secondly, this is Air Force Materiel Command small business program sponsored event. We work closely with WBI in conducting events throughout the year. This is our I think maybe our 6th this year, and our last one for this government fiscal year. Is those involved with us, that's going to end here. Our fiscal year is going to end in September, and we really had a full agenda this year of really relevant topics, everything from our infrastructure needs to cyber, to Space Force. We had a 2-day Space Force event last week, and then concluding with our with today's event on FOCI SCRM, which is really what excited me about this is it's like totally of the moment, right? You can't get something that's more of the moment and in the news, right? So we're going to be learning about that today on everything from what is driving our FOCI requirements and how that's going to impact, obviously, right, has a direct impact on our supply chain and that risk management reduction. I usually do a little, intro to what Air Force Materiel Command is. I'll just do that really quickly, right? And so Air Force Materiel Command, it's spelled with an E, right? It's materiel, that's military material. And for the Air Force, what is military material? Well, that's aircraft, their systems, right? Weapon systems, munitions, all those things to support it. Really goes from Air Force Materiel Command, goes from that basic generation of the idea all the way through the sustainment, the acquisition and sustainment of that system throughout its life. And so we're very large. We have about 90,000 employees. Most of those are civilian, 80,000 civilians. And just quickly, we have 6 centers. to make it really simple for those that are in the room, we have our pamphlet over there on the table. It's a short description of all the centers, as well as the small business leads at all the centers. And so I'm at headquarters, right? And so we really do that organized, train, equip role, right? Helping our centers execute their small business programs. So starting with that initial idea, right? Air Force Research Laboratory. You know, will be hearing from AFWERX today. They reside within AFR and they manage, right? They execute and manage the SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Program for the Air Force. They really transformed it. And you know, so taking that basic idea right up to like prototype. And then we go on that we're going to buy it, right? And that's Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. That is where we acquire all those systems. If you're thinking of the new B-21 bomber, the new tanker, all of those systems I think we're familiar with in the Air Force inventory, they are acquired within Air Force Lifecycle Management Center in what we call Program Executive Officer portfolios. We have a PEO for bombers, a PEO for mobility, et cetera. And our small business director for Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, which is also headquartered here, right, Pat, is Luke Schultz right there. And so then we move on from there. And so we've acquired it, right? But before it enters our inventory, it needs to be tested. So we have the Air Force Test Center. And the test center is headquartered at Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California in the desert, obviously, because we need a range, right? We also have a range at Eglin over the water, and we have the world standard wind tunnel facility in Tennessee. And that's all Air Force Test Center. Then it's in the inventory. What has to happen? It has to be sustained in that supply chain, which we're going to talk about today. And that's the Air Force Sustainment Center, headquartered at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. As are our depots, right? And I always say, you hear about the B-52 flying 50 years, we're going to fly 50 more. That's because of our depots, right? And they also manage our supply chain. So we have depots at Tinker in Oklahoma City, a depot in Hill Air Force Base, Ogden, Utah, and a depot at Robbins Air Force Base. So that's the sustainment center. I'm going very high level, but trying to make it simple to understand. And then finally, you know, you move on from there. So that's for the centers. You understand how that flows. And then we have Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, and they are headquartered at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. Again, they're doing what's in their title, managing our and executing our nuclear enterprise acquisition statement. So then, finally, our 6 centers: Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, headquartered at Joint Base San Antonio, and they really manage our installations at an enterprise level. We look at our institutions like their weapon systems, right? And so they're bringing an enterprise approach to that. And again, to make it simple, right? Our infrastructure, right, is quite large, you know, across the globe at all Air Force installations. And so they're bringing that enterprise approach to that, where we look at our basically going down to HVAC systems, right? Enterprise-wide, paving, our runways, and that's all done within Air Force Civil Engineering Center, which is part of AFIMSC. And they do a lot more, but that's just to make it easy for you to understand that type of scope that they're doing, looking at the enterprise, the Air Force installation enterprise, and missions that are being executed. So that's the command at a very high level. You can look at our pamphlet and do a little more. And if you're online and like a copy of that pamphlet, just let us know and we'll email that. Okay, so we have a great lineup today. As I'm sure all of you have seen from the agenda, right? And so we're going to open the event with some remarks and discussion, presentation by Dr. McKown, and he is our Deputy Director of what we call AFMC A4. But I'm going to read just the first paragraph from your bio. Mine, and because it's super impressive, it gives you an idea, right, of what A4 does. And so Dr. McKown is a member of the Department of Defense Senior Executive Service. He's the Deputy Director of Logistics, Civil Engineering, Force Protection, and Nuclear Integration at Headquarters Force Materiel Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Dr. McKown develops and directs policy for depot overhaul, repair, and modification of Air Force weapon systems, as well as munitions, supply, logistics plans, transportation and packaging methods, and logistics data systems. So you know, that's quite comprehensive, and you can just imagine that scope, right? Dr. McKown plans and coordinates product support and acquisition logistics for all fielded emerging Air Force weapon systems, as well as establishes guidance for Air Force retail and wholesale supply chain management of spare parts valued at more than $5.8 billion. We can imagine the complexity of our supply chain. And so with that, you, sir, and thank you very much.
I can tell you, when you look at that duty title, I knew I was in trouble when I had to pay extra to get that second and third line on my business card. So, you know, we refer to it as A410, and I'm just really pleased to be here. We did a kind of a general SCRM briefing last year, and I think it was well received. So we're kind of focusing in on foreign ownership, control, or influence flyer. Next chart. So we're going to keep everything at a classified level. I think that should be a problem. Next chart. So Air Force Materiel Command and Air Force depends on you, small business. We see them, you know, at AFMC, the centers and program offices, in admin and advisory services, in SBIR, in small business technology transfer programs. And, you know, we understand that small business is kind of the Department of Defense secret weapon. I don't know, does any of these figures up here shock you? It really shocked me. I mean, small businesses make up 99.9% of all the businesses in the country, 44% of all economic activity, 47.3% of private sector employment. So, you know, the bottom line is that you are critical to our success. And, you know, I think most of you watch the news, you realize that, you know, our country is in, you know, perilous times, I would say. We're no longer uncontested. You know, we're in kind of a peer-to-peer competition, and you're very important to us. And so I think this is a topic that we wanted to bring to you, because we know you're important, but also, you know, our competitors, you know, China, to kind of get right down to it, and Russia and everyone else that would like to, you know, challenge the United States. They know you're important, so they're going to try to utilize that you. So we want you to be aware of that. So can you go to the next chart, please? The global industrial base is at risk for exploitation every day. This is something that it's different than what we're used to when we think about military competition and confrontation. You know, it's something I'm sure they're going to be talking about, Mike, probably the asymmetrical warfare. You know, and when back in the day, you know, armies would face off on the battlefield, and they would go head to head. You have direct combat. You know, that's pretty fundamental. But then we got a little bit more sophisticated. We realized you didn't have to attack the enemy directly. You could attack their supply lines behind, you know, them indirectly, and you could achieve the same results. In World War II, one of the things that we used against Germany is we launched a lot of air raids against ball bearing factories because we thought that was the critical, node that would stop their military machine. Now it's even more sophisticated, and our enemies, they're not going to bomb our factories. They're going to buy our factories. They're going to buy our intellectual property, or they're going to offer up a joint venture that maybe looks appealing on the outside, but what they're trying to do is get inside, basically to leverage the things you're doing. So, although we're not at war kinetically, we are at competition every day against our adversaries. And again, I'll foot stomp it. But you are, very important to us. And I think that you need to be aware of that importance and the possibility that the competitors are going to try to use against you. You've all heard about the ways that you can be under attack. The malware, ransomware, attacking your IT systems, counterfeit parts, something that it might not even be like a direct attack. It might be just a company out there looking to make a buck, but to try to do knockoff parts. But it affects us nonetheless. The partnerships with restricted entities, as a small business in our country, you have basically freedom to do business with folks, but we just want you all to know that for certain restricted entities that it could impact your ability to do business with the United States government. So I looked at the lineup. You've got a wealth of briefers that are going to walk you through this. Again, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are perfectly legal, but there could be consequences down the road if we want to do business with the government. Check the notes here, make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, next chart. So, as you participate in this session, realize the government is depending on you. One of the things that I just got finished working is a supply readiness and resiliency sprint last week at Wright Brothers, and it looked at the readiness of the Air Force, and we've got some serious challenges trying to get the spare parts that we need to make our aircraft ready. And readiness is very important to us because we don't want to get in a conflict. We want to rely on deterrence. And so if you're ready to go to war and you're strong, that actually prevents you in a lot of cases having to go into combat or conflict because it's a deterrence. So we're dependent on small business in a lot of cases because you all have the innovative ideas. You can really pivot a lot quicker than some of the big companies. And that's what we need. We need better, faster, cheaper, and companies that can react and pivot to demand signals that may not be as stable as we would like. But the fact that you can do that is why you're vulnerable to this and maybe a target. You just have to understand and make informed business decisions. I think the Chinese are very, very good at coming in and a legal standpoint and utilizing our system against, so just be aware of that. The FOCI, it's not going to be obvious in many cases. It's not a direct attack. It's more of an end around this asymmetrical warfare that we're dealing with. And so, this is, it's a little bit complicated. That's why we've got all these experts lined up today to kind of get into the details and talk with you about that. But I would just ask that you be on your guard. Ask questions as we go through this. There's a lot of subject matter experts here. And then I would say build relationships. I've been doing this for logistics for almost 40 years. And the longer I've been in, the less I actually physically do. It's more at this level, it's more about knowing someone that has the skill set to take care of these sort of problems. So use this opportunity to build relationships, and I think you can leverage those throughout your entire career. So with that, if anyone has any specific questions for me, I'll take them now, but I'd rather give back a little bit more time to the real SMEs so that we can get into the nitty gritty. So any questions for me? So,
Anything online, Jim?
No.
all right, well, I'd like to stay, actually, the last time we did it, I stuck around, and I think Mike Cooper gave me my 101 on SCRM, because there's going to be a lot to learn. I think it's very beneficial for contact information. If anyone needs to contact us, I think they can go through you, Jeff. I'd be more than happy to do this. Very, very important. So take the time and ask the questions, and then again, we're counting on you all to help get us through these things.
Well, we're now transitioning over to Dr. Bryson Reynolds at the Office of Small Business Programs at DoD. Okay. And he has a great understanding and knowledge of FOCI and its sources and legislatively and how it's going to be implemented. And so we'll hear from him, and I just wanted to state, following up on what Dr. McKown just said about relationships and connections, right? Super important, right? Any forms of business, especially in this. I have my card, and in the folder is my contact us saying there's a workflow email in there. Don't be concerned. I have somebody that Chelsea monitors that, and we'll get back with you if you need to schedule something. And I'll get, if you're wanting to get more connected to the SCRM team, etc., I'll make sure you get connected to my Cougars over here. There are other members of their team, and even Dr. McKown if needed. So and I will say that the SCRM team is super willing to talk to people and hear what they have to say. So, super impressed with that. So basically, with that, turning it over to you, Bryson. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Okay, so over to you.
Excellent. Thank y'all for having me today. It's great to give a presentation with other FOCI experts. But let's get into it. So today we're going to be talking about foreign ownership, control, and influence. We're going to be defining some basic terms, talking about kind of the structure of FOCI, what the risks are to a business that were laid out a little bit in the previous presentation, and what being under FOCI looks like. Go to the next slide. So first, we're going to define some terms related to foreign ownership, control, and influence. We're going to go through those aspects of foreign ownership, control, and influence and define them individually within this greater term. Next, we're going to be talking about why FOCI is important, why small business owners should care about FOCI. Obviously, it's a risk to the US government for there to be foreign adversarial capital or influence in businesses in our defense industrial base, but there's also a risk to the business that is quite substantial as well. So we're going to go over some of that. And next, what factors can put a business under FOCI? So what are the things that you should look out for FOCI, the things that you should be aware of, FOCI risk and how to mitigate it, and ways to kind of avoid FOCI risk in the first place. Next. So I'm going to read this definition straight because while it's complicated, it's important. So a US company is considered to be under FOCI whenever a foreign interest has the power, direct or indirect, whether exercised or not exercised, and whether or not exercisable, through ownership of the US company securities by contractual agreements or other means, to direct or decide matters affecting the management or operations of that company in a manner which may result in unauthorized access to certain information or may adversely affect the performance of certain contracts. So certain there is taking the place of classified information or classified contracts, but also proprietary information, R&D information and R&D contracts. So it's not all information in all contracts, but the important ones, so to speak. Next. And one thing I will say about my last point, the whether direct or indirect, whether or not exercised, and whether or not exercisable is covering the whole aspect. It doesn't have to be an individual who is currently influencing or controlling some aspect of the company if they have the potential to influence and control some aspect of the company that's important to that information and those contracts. So keep in mind of so the source. I got a question in the chat. Can I state the source of these definitions? So the first definition is from what is the? I'm trying to remember. I'm blanking, of course, right now. Some of them are our own definitions that we've modified. Some of them are straight from a national security, I want to say SIPR, but that's not correct. It's an acronym, CISA, no. I can't remember, honestly. I can follow up and get you that answer, but they are government. It's not exactly through CFIUS, so it's actually through DCSA, one of their NISPOM. Thank you, Chris. So it's from the NISPOM, where we get these definitions. And other aspects, there'll be definitions from legislation. So the most recent SBIR reauthorization for the SBIR, Small Business Innovation and Research awards. For that reauthorization, there's some good definitions that will be taken from there. So it's from a few different locations. So Q&A and the chat, I'm trying to follow both, but Q&A is kind of to everyone that the Q&A is a little easier to control the flow of information. So if you're able to put a less timely question in the Q&A, if it's something I need to answer before I go forward, then you can throw it in chat.
Hey, and Dr. Reynolds, could you also, if you're going to address a question in Q&A, can you read the question for the folks that are
Yes.
here?
Apologies. Yeah, so the initial question was, can you state the source of these definitions? And that's from the NISPOM. And then someone was asking the difference between the chat window and the question and answer window, but I think that's primarily for the online participants. So back to the presentation. The source of FOCI, foreign ownership, control, or influence, can affect the severity of risk, or sorry, the source of the FOCI can affect the severity of the risk associated with the FOCI. So to a question earlier that was in the Q&A, how did the Five Eyes nations participate? Technology being adopted in a UK MOD should be available to US warfighters. So FOCI, we're not concerned about foreign investment as a whole. Foreign investment is a healthy part of our defense industrial base, of any industrial base. What we're really worried about primarily, so it's not zero risk if it's an ally, but it's a much lower risk if it's a close ally of the United States. While adversary or near-peer competitors like Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China pose much greater FOCI risks. So it's on a sliding scale where some adversaries and competitors are much more concerning to us. And it also depends on the process you're going through, whether you're being assessed for FOCI for a facility security clearance, or for a classified contract, or for a SBIR award. All of those have different processes with different thresholds, so to speak. So there's a question in the Q&A before I go forward. Is there a list of countries with high and low FOCI risks available? So there's not an explicit list. I will say that these 4 countries were called out in the SBIR reauthorization and are kind of your main 4. I will say that the Department of State has, or State Department has a list of countries of concern. And so that is another area, and that may be due to terrorist activity or political situation or other reason why they are a country of concern. And so those countries would be extra concerning. If they're an ally with us in some formal, close way, NATO, Five Eyes, AUKUS, then those would generally be considered lower. But it's a case-by-case basis, and exactly how that connection is, the type of connection is going to matter a lot, as we'll see and go through here. Next. So adverse FOCI can have various negative effects on your business. Next. So reduced economic competitiveness can be a serious consequence of adverse FOCI. So from insider threat, there can be a loss of proprietary information. There can be increased supply chain risks, depending on where your suppliers and manufacturing occurs. Loss of first rights to patents. Competitors can spring up with access to your IP and kind of get to market first or get to market cheaper. Loss of revenue resulting from unwanted technology transfer. So reduced economic competitiveness is one main negative effect on your business. Next is reduced domestic investor interest. So especially dual use and defense investors are aware of FOCI and looking out for it for their own risk profile when they're investing in businesses. So it may also hamper investment in your business from American and allied investors. Next. And as we've talked about a little bit, and we'll continue to talk about, you'll have more limited access to government aid, awards, and contracts. So national security considerations may impact your eligibility for government funds, and you could lose eligibility for a facility security clearance, which is required for many different types of contracts, certainly classified contracts, but other contracts that may require access to a facility or access to CUI or secret information. Next. So foreign, what are we talking about when we're talking about foreign and foreign control and influence? Thank you to Dan Erickson, who put into chat the state.gov link to countries of particular concern, watch list countries. Hopefully we can share that out as well. It's easy enough to Google, I believe. So in FOCI, foreign generally refers to foreign persons from a foreign country of concern. So let's define those terms. Next, a foreign person is any foreign national, foreign government, or foreign entity, or any entity over which control is exercised or exercisable, we see that again, by a foreign national, foreign government, or foreign entity, or any entity over which control is exercised or exercisable by a foreign person is a foreign person. So we're not talking about just a foreign national here. There are foreign nationals, foreign government organizations, other companies can be a foreign person in this case, and any entity over which control is exercised. So a company that can appear to not be foreign, if control is exercised by a foreign person over that entity, then that becomes effectively a foreign person. Next, we'll talk about foreign countries of concern. So as I mentioned earlier, that specifically means the People's Republic of China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the Russian Federation, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and any other countries determined to be a country of concern by the Secretary of State. So those are kind of what we talk about for a foreign country of concern. Those are going to be your high risk countries, as we've talked about before. That doesn't mean that a connection to an allied country will matter more for a classified contract or for facility security clearance, because even if we have allied countries, we're not necessarily looking to share all of our classified information with those allied countries. So there will be some concern related to foreign ownership, even from an ally in certain contracts and in certain situations. But for example, for a SBIR award, the only concerns are from countries of concern. So are these 4 countries and other countries determined to be a country of concern by the Secretary of State? Any other country, England, Germany, Japan, Australia, etc., close allies are, and not countries of concern, are not considered troublesome when applying for a SBIR or SBIR STTR award. Next. So in FOCI, ownership generally refers to beneficial ownership of the business. Next. So we're talking about for beneficial owner, that's an owner of a security, so a portion of the business in this case, includes any person directly or indirectly through contract, arrangement, understanding, relationship, or otherwise, has or shares. Next. Voting power, which includes the power to vote, direct the voting of security, and or next, the investment power, which includes the power to dispose or direct the dispositions of a security. So beneficial owner is going to be who we're talking about when we're talking about the ownership part of foreign ownership, control, and influence. Next. So security is the business. Voting power involves any power that an owner might have to make decisions. So this does bring up an important point. If a partial owner of the business through the agreement, the ownership agreement, has no control over that business, then that's going to be considered a much lower risk or concern than a small percent owner of the business who does have control through their ownership agreement. So there are ways in which contracts and ownership can be structured such that an owner doesn't have the control that might be concerning for a business. But that, again, is on an individual kind of case-by-case basis how that works. Next. So control over a business comes from various sources. So covered individuals and key management personnel are the primary focus. If you can, next. So a covered individual is someone who contributes in a substantive, meaningful way to the scientific development or execution of an R&D project. carried out with R&D funds. So if you're in the science and technology sphere, many cases with a SBIR awardee, that is similar, a covered individual is similar to authorship, if that's something that makes sense to you, authorship on a scientific paper. If they are involved enough intellectually to garner authorship, then they would also most likely be a covered individual. So they have access to important proprietary information. They have access to influence the results. They have intellectual input and knowledge of the R&D. That's a covered individual. Next, we talk about key management personnel. They are entity officials who hold a majority or have stock in. They don't have to. Whether they own or whether they don't, if they have the direct or indirect authority to influence or decide issues affecting the management or operations of the company, or specifically a classified contract, then they're considered key management personnel. So those are going to be certainly your C-suite, but other management that they can have 0 to some ownership. But that's not what we're talking about here. They can control the business and make decisions on behalf of the business, and direct the business. So those are areas in which control can come from for foreign ownership, control, and influence. Next, we're talking about influence. Oh, one more control. Oh, yes. Malign foreign talent recruitment programs. Our adversary and competitor nations are increasingly using malign foreign talent recruitment programs. Those are programs, position, or activity that includes compensation in some form provided by a foreign country to their designee as a targeted individual in exchange for a few things. Next. In exchange for unauthorized transferred intellectual property. Next. Being required to recruit trainees or researchers. Next. Establishing a laboratory or company or undertaking any employment in or affiliated with a foreign country. Next, I believe there's one more. Or other activities that may conflict or interfere with the federal research or development award or contract. So other countries are using these foreign talent recruitment programs as a way to get access to as a way to affect brain drain kind of on these R&D companies, and SBIR awards specifically they're looking out for, but other companies that are providing. And you'd be surprised at the breadth of types of companies that can be affected by this type of recruiting. And so now we'll go on to influence. Do see, before I go on to influence, I see one question in the chat. So UK-owned companies can apply for SBIR. No, I'm not a SBIR expert, so I might leave that to someone in the room to answer in between. But I believe the companies have to be US owned. So there can be, at least majority US owned and US located. If there were a minority UK ownership in a company that was applying for a SBIR, I don't think that would be an issue. But if they were wholly owned or majority owned by the UK, then that would be an issue. Okay, so influence. In foreign ownership, control, and influence, influence is kind of the largest category, and it's the hardest to define because the sphere of influence on a business can be quite large. So it can be described as a company's dependence on a foreign entity for revenue, funding, debt, supply, infrastructure, or any other non-ownership based economic relationship, which basically means any economic relationship that we haven't covered so far can create a meaningful impact on a company's decision-making and interest. One example I like to use is of a large customer. We generally don't think of customers being able to influence or influence kind of going that direction from customer to company. But if they represent a third or half of your business, and maybe they want to convince you to open up a plant in their country to make logistics easier, or for some reason. So there are ways in which influence can creep in from many other different types of economic relationships. So influence is a large bucket here, but the hardest to define. Next. All right, so types of foreign influence. Because it's hard to define, I'm just going to give you some examples really quick. So the ability to direct or decide matters affecting the management or operations of the company. So that's kind of more of your control. Any contracts, agreements, assistance awards, understandings, or arrangements between the company and a foreign person or entity. That's more direct type of foreign influence. Next. Debt liabilities or obligations. Next. Supply chain, raw materials, or hardware supplied by a entity located in a foreign country of concern or connected to a foreign country of concern. Next. Professional or institutional appointments. So similar to Malign Foreign Talent Recruitment Program, but outside one of those programs, appointments or positions within a foreign government connected entity, and including Malign Foreign Talent Recruitment Programs. Next. Foreign government connected customers or customers based in a foreign country of concern. We talked a little bit about that already. Next. Research collaborations with a foreign government connected entity or with a research entity located in a foreign country of concern. And there may be one more. No, there's not. And for the sake of time, I don't want to go through all of these different FOCI risk mitigation aspects, but this is just to say that there are lots of ways that you can mitigate or reduce your FOCI risk through actions that you can take to kind of start to address FOCI. So requiring covered individuals to complete insider risk awareness training is something that you can do and should do whether or not you already have a FOCI risk or concern. If you have a concern, if you have a problematic foreign board member, you may work to remove that foreign board member from your board. That's something proactive that you can do. While it can be a large step, it can be an important step and a vital step in mitigating foreign ownership if that person is going to be a concern. Limiting your foreign supply chain dependence as much as possible, getting your supply chain either onshored here in the US or friend or ally shored is going to be an important aspect of doing that. And then removing as much as you can foreign debt and foreign financial obligations as another one. So there are lots of different aspects, and you can go through these when you get these slides. And I believe that ends us next for our closing. So in conclusion, FOCI is vital to a business. So reducing your FOCI, is vital to a business because it reduces the chances of those threats that we talked about: unwanted technology transfer, loss of customers and revenue, the loss of U.S. government assistance awards, and loss of facility security clearance eligibility. Those are all potential risks of having high FOCI risk. Next, and something we talked about a little bit at the beginning, but I didn't want to focus too much on. Of course, a business within the defense industrial base that is under FOCI can pose an impact to national security interest of the United States. So that's one reason why the government side, we care, but also with our office and other offices of small business programs, we're really looking out for we're also really looking out for the interests of the business. So that's why I wanted to focus on those aspects today. And then do we have time for questions, or do we want to move on?
Yes, we have time. If you'd like to take a look at the Q&A real quick.
All right.
You read them so everybody can hear it. Then I'll.
Sure. If you just go through.
Okay. How do Five Eye nations participate? Technology being adopted by UK mod should be available to US warfighters.
Right. So talked a little bit about that. So it depends on exactly how you're talking about. I believe this was typed during the previous presenter. But in general, minority UK or ally ownership is not problematic in most cases, I would say. And agreed that we need to have access to our ally supplier and vice versa. That is what is extremely important for the health of the defense industrial base. Next question, if you want to go to.
So doesn't DoD conduct FOCI and supply chain risk management of all their suppliers? Why not use D&B, something that's done in Bradstreet?
Yeah, I'm not familiar exactly with Dun and Bradstreet's capabilities there. I believe some FOCI due diligence may use Dun and Bradstreet as a portion of their due diligence, although don't quote me on that because I'm not 100%. I do know that for FOCI due diligence, there are a lot of different sources that are utilized, some commercial, some public, sometimes through the intel community when necessary. Sorry, reading through the question again. Do they do it on all their suppliers? No, would be my answer. So mainly currently, we're focused on where there's official, kind of official standardized processes are in classified contracts, facility security clearance applications. Contracts over $5 million will be formally assessed for FOCI risk starting here soon. SBIR sitter awards, I've just started the process of formally assessing or doing FOCI due diligence on all the applicants. But I do, and there are other one-off programs here and there that have their own processes for FOCI due diligence or similar. So it's a little hodgepodge at times. But I think from what I've seen, standardization is growing to make sure that businesses don't have to go through different processes depending on what they're going after. It can be a uniform or as uniform as possible a process. Congress is only more and more interested in FOCI from what I've seen. And so I expect for FOCI due diligence to kind of expand where it is being utilized, not to shrink or stay the same. So I expect more and more areas of DoD will be doing FOCI and supply chain risk management for suppliers, for contractors.
Okay, next question, does DoD OSBP conduct FOCI risk assessments themselves or rely on other parts of the United States government?
Right, so for classified contracts, for facility security clearances, and for contracts greater than 5 million, that's DCSA, Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, that does the FOCI due diligence there. For SBIR sitter applications, so that's done at the service or agency level. So Air Force takes care of Air Force's, Air Force does the due diligence for Air Force's applications for SBIR sitter. Sometimes the services are helping out some of the smaller agencies, but it's up to each individual service and agency to have their own, while it fits within a standard, to their internal processes to be covered on their own. And they can make agreements they can make agreements on their own to have a larger service or someone else do portions of that. But at the current moment, DoD OSBP doesn't do any due diligence. We are working on bringing more education through Project Spectrum about foreign ownership, control, and influence, and developing some tools that will help small businesses be able to understand their FOCI risk profile and be able to begin to mitigate it kind of proactively before they're before their application or before their contract is finalized as much as possible. So we're trying to help on that side of the equation. Who is a covered individual? I went over that a little bit. So that's going to be anyone that is involved in the, the question from Deanna is who is the covered individual? That's going to be anyone who is involved in an R&D project such that they have access to the intellectual property, they are intellectually participating, contributing to that process, and therefore have access to the intellectual property and are part of creating that intellectual property. What impact do I foresee from the BRICS activity? I don't know enough. I know what BRICS is. So BRICS is in a group of countries. I'm going to have a hard time remembering which ones. I believe it's Brazil, Russia. I don't know. I don't know the others. Does anyone know what BRICS is? So we can at least define that for those who don't know.
China, South Africa.
Okay.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa is, I think.
Excellent.
But Google.
Yes. Yeah. So Chris Banks also put that in the chat, as well as Obena Mua. Apologize for, I'm sure, butchering that name. So so that group of countries and their allyship with each other, I don't know how that will affect. I don't know if that will push. I mean, India, there's a close relationship with. China and Russia, less so for many reasons. I don't know how that will affect South Africa and Brazil as far as their status as countries of concern. So we'll have to look out for that. That'll mainly be determined by the Department of State. We have one last question, so I don't take up too much time, from Brian Sims in the chat. What means are being used to monitor joint research and publications for intellectual theft and influence? That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you, though. I'm not aware of the processes that are being used to monitor those aspects. But I imagine, I'm confident they are being monitored, because I know co-authorship is something that is being looked at as connections between an individual, maybe on a SBIR application, and other individuals of concern, we'll say. And so I know that it's being monitored, but I don't know what tools or how that's being monitored. And we have a live question.
Go ahead, sir.
So I have maybe it's a series of questions. So, in writing proposals in the past, so I'm a large business. We have a small business here, but we don't operate as a small, we operate as a large. We're owned by an international conglomerate. So owned by Beretta, the firearm manufacturer, which is a couple $2 billion in revenue a year. And in writing proposals for various things that we submit, normally we would go and we kind of detail that ownership, but there's never, like, you're almost doing that to kind of say, hey, we have the financial means and the longevity to support the contract, et cetera, et cetera. There hasn't ever really been a section where they ask you, hey, go through and detail out for me the full potential risk, right? So
Right.
I understand that's coming. When that happens, is that a nuanced answer, or is that a simple checkbox? Oh, this is, a local company that's an ITAR registered company full of American people that's owned by an Italian company. We haven't been at war with Italy for about 80 years, so they get the check mark and they say, not a problem, similar to the UK given earlier. Or is it this nuanced gray area where the answer is, it depends?
Yeah, this whole area is gray. So it's not, so there will be, so if you're applying for a SBIR award, right, there will be a checkbox in some aspect of, with Italy, no problem, UK, no problem. If China is on there, okay, let's look deeper into this. And so they'll kind of exclude from concern the allied countries for a SBIR award. And then they'll look deeper into the countries of concern and what connections that may entail. It is not a black mark that disqualifies your application. There is an emphasis on mitigation for these risks. So it's about understanding the depth of the risk, what exactly is the concern, what type of influence or control does this risk carry? Are there ways in which you can structure the project to be walled off from areas of concern? Has Beretta performed contracts for the Chinese military? Would be a very different question than if there is a minority ownership of an individual in China who has no connections, who their only red flag is that they are a foreign national from China. Or if they are a general or were a general in the Chinese military, that's going to be a very different thing. So it is a world of gray. There are a lot of things to consider. That's why we're trying to focus on this education. And this is the kind of 101 course that I've given today. But there is a lot of gray, and it's really hard to dig into that nuance. I'm happy to do that with people as much as I can for their specific situations. But you also have to understand that I'm not the one who is going to be making the final decision on your application or your contract, your SBIR award. Someone else will. And so there's a judgment aspect there. So something that I may deem more concerning, they may deem less concerning, or vice versa. But we're trying to standardize that process so that way whoever's looking at it is coming to similar conclusions on that. But it's not simple black and white. This is bad, this is good. It's really digging into the nuance of exactly how those connections are. Here we have another live question.
Yeah, hey Bryson, Billy Grill here with the Apex Accelerator. When you were describing reviewing SBIR sitter and academic papers, it reminded me of a capability that Ensign presented during a meeting a couple months back, where they would search the language in a academic paper or proposal here, and then try to see if it popped up in Mandarin in Guangzhou University, China, or whatever. I guess I wanted to ask, to what extent is the DoD using Ensign technologies and partnering with them throughout the branches?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with that capability directly, although it doesn't surprise me. The services are in, at least on the SBIR sitter side, which I've been most involved in, the services are highly communicative of their tools and, sorry, to define Ensign.
National Security Innovation Network?
Yes, thank you. National Security Innovation Network. The services are working together to kind of understand those, and places like Ensign, NSIC, and those other kind of innovation hubs are also involved to understand the process. So I can't answer that specific technology, but there is intentionally a bringing together of minds across DoD to answer these questions and look at these capabilities. So I can't speak to that one, but hopefully they are aware of that, and there are efforts to make sure that everyone is aware of the capabilities that kind of everyone else has access to.
Thanks, Brad.
Bryce, we just had 2 new questions in the Q&A. You still have time on you're still.
Okay.
Believe it or not, so.
Yeah, keep them coming.
Is there a matrix available on risk identification and then risk mitigation steps with FOCI available for small businesses?
We are working on that. We do not have that available at this time, but that is something that we are actively working on as an educational tool, and to help businesses both understand their FOCI risks and what they can do about it, and what they can kind of proactively do to address that. So it's a great idea. We are working on that in our office to make sure that those are the types of capabilities, tools, resources that we're working to develop for small businesses and other businesses in the defense industrial base.
Okay, one more. Who or which agency initiate FOCI assessment? Or is it a case by case? Is it only for certain programs / awards, or apply across the board in relation to supply chain?
Right, so that's a great question. So primarily FOCI due diligence is performed in a few areas. So those are SBIR awards, no matter where in DoD, actually no matter where in the federal government you're applying, there's going to be FOCI due diligence performed on any SBIR application from here on out, from July forward. There've always been, or at least, you know, for all intents and purposes, always been some foreign ownership, control and influence due diligence with classified contracts. So if you're working on a classified contract, there are SBIR and STIR awards. Oh, that's already mentioned that one. There are contracts over 5 million. That one is new from the 2020 NDAA. The process has been in development for a couple years for exactly how that's going to be done. That's also done by DCSA, who does that for classified contracts as well. And so that's going to be rolling out here in the next couple months. So for all contracts greater than $5 million. And then there are, the last one is for facility security clearance. Those are the main areas, and that's done by DCSA as well. Those are the main areas. There are other programs, there are other areas that have spun up their own FOCI due diligence. They are not required yet to do so, but they have done that proactively. So you may see it in other places. But as I said earlier, and I'll reiterate, Congress is very interested in this issue. Their interest doesn't seem to be waning. It seems to be a bipartisan issue, or at least a nonpartisan issue. And so I expect for FOCI to only be FOCI due diligence to only be more required in more areas going forward. So I think especially if you're in one of those classes, going after one of those types of contracts or awards or clearances, you definitely want to be aware of FOCI. Even if you're not, I still think you want to be proactive about your FOCI. Because you're going to be required to do due diligence at some point, no matter your, in my opinion, I think it's going to be at some point, no matter your type of contract or award status. And secondly, but not second in importance, is for the health of your own business, right? This is not just a risk to the government that the government cares about. This can be a risk to the livelihood of the business, to the success of the business, and not just on whether you're more or less successful, but really the life of the business can be threatened by certain FOCI attacks and certain FOCI avenues. So I would be aware of it for those reasons as well.
Okay, one more just came in. How closely are you working with the branch of services, FOCI and CFIUS groups?
CFIUS, yeah.
Okay.
So we're in constant communication. So with Silver Sitter, in those rooms, the in NCIS, AFOSI, for example, Liz Mellon in the Navy, the name slightly rings a bell, but I haven't talked to her personally, I'm pretty sure. But there is increasing crosstalk. So one of the things we're doing as well is trying to stand up a foreign ownership control and influence working group within the government to bring in all of those voices. I can tell you that we are bringing in both small business advocate voices and FOCI experts. So that includes NCIS, that includes Air Force OSI. I wouldn't be surprised if, depending on the fact that you mentioned Liz Mellon, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up on the invite list as well. Bringing all those voices together so that way we can come up with both the best ways to address these issues from the broadest of voices, but also that way those answers, those solutions can be then standardized because we have everyone on board from the beginning. So yes, we are trying as much as possible to work with all the voices, all the stakeholders in FOCI, and not silo. CFIUS they're slightly different in their focus, but we are bringing them into the FOCI working group to get their perspective on things, which we think is really important. But they're kind of working on the after there is a FOCI relationship of concern to solve that, while we're trying to work on more of the preventative due diligence, active due diligence side of it. So we have another question.
Two more questions, Jeff.
Well,
Yep.
Dr. Reynolds, we're going to need to stay on our schedule right now. And so, but let's hold those questions, and we've got if we have some time later, we'll address them. Okay?
So Dr. Reynolds, you're more than welcome to, you can type in the Q&A the answer to those questions if you want.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
And we can.
Thank you all for your attention and your great questions.
Yeah, and note he's kind enough to include his email address here on this chart, so feel free to reach out. That's great. Anyway, anyway, so a couple of things, right? Is we had the question, which is a basic one, but I just want to address there, maybe help people figure out how to answer it. Is there was that question: is can a UK company apply for SBIR? Right, and so SBIR eligibility requirements. I used just go to Google and do the SBIR program. You go to the SBA site, you can put that eligibility is, right? So anybody can and I'm just only United States small businesses are eligible to participate in SBIR. A small business must meet the eligibility requirements set forth in the CFR. I won't read all that. And then there's some, number one is the business must be organized for profit and place of business located in the U.S. Number two, more than 50% owned and controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens or permanent resident aliens in the United States, etc. You can read further on that. And number three, no more than 500 employees. Right, so it is a U.S.-based small business controlled by U.S. Citizens or resident aliens. So now, when it comes to the large business, right? That question, that's a big one, right? Of how that will ultimately fall out, right? Because you're not involved, you wouldn't be involved in the SBIR program.
Well, sometimes we would team with the small business, and we're a subcontractor for the small business,
Right.
SBIR effort, so we do that.
Right. And so basically that's a more, we'll have to look at that question a little bit more. And luckily we'll have AFWERX here a little bit later. And you can probably address that there on how they'll be looking at that. But again, I think Dr. Reynolds, talked about, that way that be looking at, the control or their interests in the countries that we focus. question doesn't get answered today, we'll get with me afterwards. So next on the list is we're going to take it just a little bit further here from the perspective now of entity vetting and facility clearances in FOCI, and we have Zachary Bernard from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, again, Department of Defense. And Zachary, can you hear me? Can we hear you?
Good afternoon. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Now, I've been asked to not start this briefing by saying that the Air Force is my favorite branch and that I'm an Air Force veteran. I told my boss that I would stop doing that. So if she asks, don't tell them that the Air Force is my favorite. And I definitely love the small businesses that support it. So good afternoon, everybody. Starting with a bad joke. My name is Zach Bernard, and I am a representative from DCSA here today. Today, I have the privilege to speak to you about a topic that is critical to our nation's security and the success of your businesses as well in the realm of federal government contracting. So the discussion today will revolve around facility clearances life cycle, a subject that I know is of great interest to many of you and is directly impacts your ability to work on sensitive government contracts and contribute to our nation's defense. So I'll begin by exploring the fundamental principles that govern the clearance process. Then we'll examine the different stages of the life cycle, delving into the specific requirements and expectations at each step. And lastly, what we'll do is we'll discuss the best practices and regulations that can help maintain compliance and stay ahead of those potential changes. But before I delve into the facility clearance life cycle, I think it's essential for me to talk about the organization that plays the pivotal role in this process, and that is DCSA. So DCSA's mission is to protect America's trusted workforce, its critical technologies, and sensitive information from adversaries, just as Dr. Reynolds had indicated previously. As the nation's primary agency for conducting background investigations and managing security clearances, DCSA plays the vital role in ensuring the protection of our nation's most valuable assets. The agency's vision is to become the premier provider of trusted security services, driving excellence through innovation, fostering a culture of continuous improvement, and ensuring security in our government workforce. So we're guided by these core values of integrity, respect, commitment, and accountability, and DCSA strives to uphold the highest standards of professionalism and ethical conduct in all business. So now let's discuss DCSA's specific role in the FCL process. As the agency responsible for overseeing the granting, denial, and revocation of facility clearances, DCSA plays a critical role in ensuring that only trustworthy organizations have access to classified information. This process begins with a thorough assessment of company's security posture, including an evaluation of its personnel, physical security measures, information systems, and overall adherence to security regulations, not the least of which is, as Dr. Reynolds said before, is the FOCI process. So DCSA also provides guidance and support throughout the life cycle, assisting businesses in navigating the complex regulatory landscape, maintaining their clearances and status. I will say this, Dr. Reynolds is probably also a lot better at looking at the Q&A. So if anybody has any, or if somebody doesn't mind tapping me on the shoulder, I'm going to kind of keep going through. So if there are any questions along the way, I have a lot of character flaws, but shy isn't one of them. So don't be afraid to reach out.
And Zach, if you would tell us next chart.
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know who's flipping the charts, but they were spot on with their timing. So I appreciate that. So slide 2. It's crucial to understand and obtaining a personal security clearance is a prerequisite for a business to be considered for a facility clearance. So you must have a personal security clearance to get an facility clearance. Furthermore, it's important to emphasize that there must be a legitimate need for the facility clearance in order to maintain it. This means that either a government contracting activity or another cleared contractor must sponsor your business on a DD Form 254, which outlines the specific security requirements for a classified contract. Mandated by the guidelines set forth in the NISP that we mentioned before, the DCSA processes, issues, monitors, and continues eligibility for entities for an FCL. So after a determination by DCSA that an entity has a legitimate need for access to classified information in connection with the government, an entity may be sponsored for an FCL. All FCL sponsorship requests are submitted through the NISP, the DCSA system of record for NISP. So that's the National Industrial Security System. So there's the NIS and the NISP. So I apologize if my Western Pennsylvania accent is coming through, but those are different elements. Submission of all FCL requests, change of conditions, clearance verifications, or self-inspection certifications to NISP or certifications to NIS are submitted there. So once a facility is cleared, DCSA has oversight authority to evaluate the security operations of the organization. The DCSA Industrial Security Representative, most often called an ICR, is the principal interface with the with the prime or subcontractor with a classified contract. A facility may require an FCL during the solicitation phase, and this is a popular question, so I definitely want to highlight this. A facility may require an FCL during the solicitation phase only if access to classified information is necessary during that phase. As it stands currently, FCLs are granted post-award. If the facility does not hold an active FCL at the appropriate level, the facility must be sponsored for the FCL or an FCL upgrade. Contractors cannot sponsor themselves for an FCL. I know it's a point of contention. There are a lot of groups that are looking at that right now, a variety of working groups, but as it stands currently, there still needs to be that existing need that can at least be tied to a contracting number. So now what we're doing is we're looking at the big wheel on the PowerPoint. With this foundation, we're going to dive into the 6 stages of the DCSA facility clearance lifecycle. It's certainly important to realize that some of these happen in tandem, in parallel, so we can have multiple things happening at the same time. But let's do a deep dive into it. So stage 1, review and triage. So the first thing we do is review sponsorship for a legitimate need to access to classified information. As I said before, this is the first step, and this is achieved by confirming the sponsorship, as well as the existence of a relevant government contract or cleared contracting relationship as documented in the 254. So then we review the contractor submitted package for completeness. This is another point that I very much want to highlight, and I'll talk about it a little bit further down when I get to my FAQ section. But really what we want to do is make sure that small businesses are not only familiar with the process as going to briefings like this, but also that you understand that your documentation will be thoroughly reviewed and it needs to be horizontally consistent and vertically consistent. What that means is all of the documents have to say the same thing. If not, the documents will be rejected, and that's going to increase in the amount of time it takes for you to get your FCL. So the things that we're looking at in this stage are corporate documents, key management personnel clearances, and any other required materials that we find that come up as part of the investigation. So, and the third part, we initially identify the initial identification of risk indicators with referrals. During this step, we conduct a preliminary assessment of the organization's risk profile. This involves identifying any risk factors that may warrant further investigation or referral to other agencies for additional review. This includes, but is certainly not limited to, FOCI. Initial key management clearance is necessary. So to finalize the review and triage stage, DCSA initiates the process of obtaining personal security clearances for key management personnel. This is a critical requirement for organizations seeking a facility clearance, as these individuals will be responsible for overseeing the protection of the classified information. This is the thing that tends to slow the process down. If you have a PCL at the secret level and you're trying to obtain an FCL at the top secret level, the PCLs have to be upgraded in line with the FCLs as well. All right, so now we're going to go down to the next section, which is purple. And this is our analysis section, where we assess the risks indicator for business vulnerabilities and contractor conduct. In this stage, we conduct a comprehensive assessment of the organization's risk profile, focusing on potential business vulnerabilities and contractor conduct. This may include examining an organization's financial stability. We talked about Dun & Bradstreet's before, management structure, and past performance, as well as any history of security violations or incidents. Then we assess those risk indicators for threats. In addition to evaluating the vulnerabilities of the contractor conduct, DCSA will assess risk indicators for potential threats. This involves identifying any foreign involvement or influence, insider threats, cyber vulnerabilities, and other factors that may pose a risk to the organization's ability to safeguard classified information. So as we continue to explore the DCSA FCL process, I'll now discuss stages 3 and 4, and that's determine the mitigation and implement the mitigation strategies. Just as before, I'll outline the steps involved with each and provide a comprehensive understanding of the process. So stage 3, determining the mitigation. Honestly, this sounds just like what it is. You review the relevant assessments. In this stage, DCSA reviews the assessment conducted during the analysis stage, focusing on the identified risk indicators, business vulnerabilities, and potential threats. This thorough examination helps DCSA determine the most appropriate mitigation measures for the organization. And then we have to develop a risk mitigation strategy. So once we know what they are, we have to do something about it. With a clear understanding of the organization's risk profile, we work closely with the contractor. And that is important to note that we do work back and forth with the FSOs to develop a tailored risk mitigation strategy. This strategy outlines the specific individuals and measures the organization's ability to implement these particular risk mitigation strategies. So in stage 4, we have to implement them. So we execute the interim measures as necessary. In some cases, this may be required to address immediate security concerns, say in the IT space, cybersecurity space, or physical security space. During the full risk mitigation strategy, then can be implemented. So if such measures are needed, the contractor is going to be responsible for executing them promptly and effectively. If they don't get handled, you can't move forward with the FCL. So then what we do is we negotiate the terms with the contractor as required. So depending on the complexity and nature of the risk mitigation strategy, negotiations may be necessary with DCSA and contractor to finalize the terms of the strategy. This is a collaborative process that ensures the mitigation measures of both feasibility and effectively addressing the identified risks. One of the other things that can slow down an FCL process is basically responding in these stages. So if DCSA sends you something on a Monday, you probably don't want to wait 2 weeks to be able to respond back to them, again, depending on the size, scope, and complexity of the action. But then we're going to look at execute the governance and the operational mitigations. So once the risk mitigation strategy has been finalized, the contractor is responsible for implementing the agreed upon measures. We need to make sure that you're going to do what you said you're going to do. This may involve updating security policies, procedures, implementing physical and technical security upgrades, or providing additional training and awareness for programs or personnel. And then we're going to ensure entity eligibility requirements are met. So throughout the implementation mitigation stage, DCSA monitors the contractor's progress in implementing the risk mitigation strategy, ensuring that all the entity eligibility requirements are met. This oversight helps maintain the integrity of the facility clearance lifecycle and confirms the organization is effectively addressing its security vulnerabilities. In other words, we need to make sure throughout the stage that if you said you're going to do something, that you're following through. And that helps build a collaborative and trusting relationship between you and DCSA, and particularly the federal government. So now stage 5, oversight. We're going to conduct field HQ oversight and security reviews. In this stage, DCSA conducts regular field and headquarters oversight activities, as well as security reviews of the organization. In other words, we're going to come say hello every now and then. This assessment serves to verify the organization's compliance with security regulations, evaluate the effectiveness of the implemented mitigation measures, and identify any potential areas for improvement. Then we're going to provide continuous engagement, support, and outreach. And that's important too. I don't want this to appear as the heavy hand of government. We are here to provide continuous engagement, but support as well, to let you know how you can secure information better, because that's good for your business. If you have a spillage, that's pretty rough on your past performance. That really hurts the CBAR. So as part of that, its oversight role, DCSA maintains continuous engagement with your organization. We're going to offer support and outreach to facilitate the effectiveness of the implemented security measures and promote a strong security culture for exactly the reasons that Dr. Reynolds had mentioned before. It's not only good for us because you're securing that information, but it's good for you as a small business as well to ensure that you're being protected. So this ongoing collaboration ensures the organization is well equipped to handle emerging threats and challenges, and that it remains compliant with all security programs. So the good news is Now we've arrived at the final stage of the DCSA facility clearance lifecycle, and that's the continuous monitoring. In this stage, we maintain an ongoing and proactive approach to ensuring the security of your organization, even after, my apologies, even after a facility clearance has been granted. So we will discuss the key components of the stage to provide a comprehensive understanding of DCSA's role in this. So in the continuous monitoring stage, the contractors submit changes or information. This is another key element. It's better to be proactive than reactive in this stage. A lot of contracts are put together for 60 months or 5 years. So given that's the case, a lot can happen in that period of time, and it's good to make sure that the files are maintained proactively as opposed to DCSA discovering things in the site visits. So as part of that monitoring stage, we're going to review any changes or information submitted by the contractor that may affect your organization's security posture. This is going to include updates to key management personnel, changes in ownership or control, modifications to security policies, or other relevant developments. This is an ongoing process, and it ensures that your organization remains in compliance. So then we're going to review news and reporting. You'd be surprised how much you can find out on that. DCSA also monitors the news and reporting related to the organization, staying informed of any developments that may have implications for the organization's security posture. Anybody that's looks at the regular news cycle, every now and then there's loss of data, security breaches of banks, and various other elements that unfortunately go out there. We monitor those things as well. We also have automated data feeds. So to facilitate this continuous monitoring process, DCSA relies on automated data feeds from various sources of structured and unstructured data. This is government databases, commercial data providers, and pretty much any other relevant channel you can think of. We have literally thousands of different data points. This data feeds help DCSA maintain a current and accurate understanding of your agency's risk profile. Like I was saying before, a lot of these things are happening in parallel, but it's also to understand that they are also continuously happening. Just once you get a risk profile generated, doesn't mean that your risk posture cannot change over the life of the contract. So, and then finally, quality assurance performed. As part of the continuous monitoring effort, we conduct regular quality assurance activities to ensure the ongoing effectiveness. So this stage is a crucial component of the DCSA process, as it ensures that the sustained security of both your organization and our data are throughout the entire FCL process. So now before I go on, let me try to answer some of the frequently asked questions that I get when I meet with small businesses. So I routinely meet with 3 to 4 small businesses a day on a variety of topics, and these are the big ones that I get. So first and foremost question I always get is, how long does the FCL process take? So unfortunately, we're not able to provide an exact answer to that because the timeline is due to many variables that I've mentioned, that even Dr. Reynolds had talked about a little bit. But they include, but not limited to, responsiveness of the facility and providing the required information by deadlines, making sure that that information is clear and consistent. In addition, it also depends on receipt of that accurate and complete information. So what are the reasons for an FCL sponsorship, what are the reasons for sponsorship being rejected? The most frequent reasons for rejecting sponsorship are due to lack of attention to detail and or no valid need for access to classified information. It's important to understand that just because you have a contract does not necessarily mean that you get an FCL. Janitorial contracts are one of the most common that I see this with. If an agency can provide an escort, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person who is being escorted needs a facility clearance level, especially if they're only going into a space to do something for about 15-20 minutes and then leave the space. So how much does an FCL cost? The government funds the process for PCLs and FCLs for access to classified information. The only costs that can exist to the small business and the FCLs are in terms of risk mitigation strategies that I identified before. And then finally, the big question I get is, when do they expire? Facility clearances are valid as long as there is an active classified contract and there is a need to access classified information in performance of the classified contracts. So I'm sure there are going to be other questions, but those are always the big ones that I get. And just to give you a heads up, some of the common sponsorship errors we see, there's no clear justification or need for access to classified information. So you have to ensure that your sponsor clearly articulates in the 254 the sponsorship information. This is especially important between prime and subcontracting relationships. Whereas you and the subcontractor are going to get on the prime's 254. If there isn't clear justification in that, it's going to be rejected. The next is missing government contract activity authorization. Certain accesses will require government contracting authorization to include intelligence information, etc. So in addition to issuance of the subcontract, you also need government contract activity approval. The prime contractor does not get unilateral right to put just anybody on their 254. The third is incomplete or discrepant information on that 254. And again, this is where we're talking about consistency with the documentation. There's a 254 instructional guide that you should be using. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but we have a tremendous amount of good resources for particularly FSOs and small businesses that are interested in the FCL process. We also have good resources in terms of DCSA specific activities with FOCI as well. And I'll highlight those here at the end. But then finally, fourth is discrepant information between the sponsorship and the 254. If it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, it's because I am. Really what we need is all of the information to have good justification and be clear, consistent, and really justify that need. All right, so I think we beat this slide to death. If I could, can I get you go to the next slide, please? I love statutes as much as the next person. It's probably a character flaw. So really what I want to do here is I want to talk about these NIST program requirements as they pertain to it. And really what we're going to do, because Dr. Reynolds did a fantastic job, we're going to focus on that left column there. So we're going to discuss the NISP requirements integrated into the FCL process. The NISP, N-I-S-P, is a critical element of the FCL process, as it establishes the standards for safeguarding classified information shared between the government and the industry partners, the small businesses. So our key aspect of the NISP requirements is the eligibility requirements outlined within 32 CFR. These requirements are crucial to ensuring the organization granted facility clearances are capable of protecting the nation's most sensitive information. So as you can see, there's 11 eligibility requirements. It would take me a while to go down through all of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit some in particular. I'm going to hit 3, 5, 9, and 10. So they're all important, but organization and existing within the United States is one that I know Dr. Reynolds had mentioned as well. So the requirement has to ensure that the organization seeking an FCL has a strong connection to the United States, both in terms of legal structures and operations. And this helps minimize potential risks associated with things like FOCI. And then the record of integrity and lawful conduct. And this might seem self-evident, but it bears mentioning. Organizations seeking an FCL must demonstrate a history of integrity and lawful conduct, which serves as a key indicator of their commitments to safeguarding classified information. If you haven't done a good job of following the laws and regulations before the contract, it does show strong correlations that there's a possibility you're not going to do so after the contract is awarded and you're safeguarding our information. Then next, you're not under FOCI to a degree that is inconsistent with our national interests. So you must be under FOCI to the extent that could not compromise your ability to protect our classified information. And I won't beat that dead horse. Dr. Reynolds has definitely done a fantastic job of highlighting those points. But if you have a lot of foreign influence, especially foreign influence from negative adversaries, that's going to really pose a significant risk in your ability to get an FCL and compete for that kind of work. And then finally, you do not pose an unacceptable risk to other national security interests. Your organization must not pose any unacceptable risks to any of our U.S. interests. This broad requirement takes into account various factors, such as an organization's financial stability, their management structure, past performance, as well as any potential threats or vulnerabilities. And a lot of that gets identified in that risk mitigation stage. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot here on the FOCI factors. Again, Dr. Reynolds did a fantastic job on that. And I want to go to the last and certainly what I believe to be the most important slide. And that's, who do you talk to when you need to get questions answered? So for our generally related sponsorship packages and FCL questions, definitely use that DSS. We used to be the Defense Security Service. We're now DCSA. But there's also the phone number there. For questions pertaining to DCSA FOCI and FOCI mitigation, we also have an email there as well. And we strive to answer those questions usually within 3 business days. And I will tell you that if you don't get an answer, don't be afraid to email the Office of Small Business Program inbox, which you can find on our DCSA website just by going to your preferred browser and typing in DCSA Small Business. It'll bring you right to us. You'll see our address. And what I can do is I can assist with that, making sure that it gets there. We also have sponsorship and FCL requirements and information on FOCI. The big thing that I want you to leave with today, if you don't leave with anything else that I'm providing you, is understand that there are really good resources out there for you. So if you just go to your preferred browser, type in DCSA FCL, what that's going to do is that's going to bring you to the DCSA homepage, where you're going to find all of the information I've talked about today. And then about a third of the way down the page, you're also going to find a video series that really recaptures a lot of what it is I'm saying here. There's also FCL handbooks, guides, pamphlets, everything else you can think of. So there are really good resources, information out there. There are people out there that are willing to help you. Don't be afraid to reach out, but definitely take advantage of those resources. So I hope that the information provided today has given you a comprehensive understanding of the FCL process and DCSA's role in it. Again, please don't hesitate to reach out. But I do want to emphasize the significance of the facility clearance lifecycle and safeguarding our nation's most sensitive information. It's through these diligent efforts of organizations like yours and the dedicated work of DCSA that we can continue to protect our nation's interests. So as you move forward, remember, we are here to help. And I want to thank you again for coming to this, for listening to me talk this afternoon. I want to thank everybody for inviting me. And most importantly, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Zach, there is one. Yeah, there is one in the Q&A. What is the approximate timeline, weeks or months, to successfully complete the FCL process?
No, that's a good question. So if on average, and I'm speaking very broadly here because it depends on a lot of factors, like I said before. How quickly do you get your information in? Is it clear and consistent? How much back and forth? How much risk do you have? How much risk needs to be mitigated? And that also affects how much needs to be in that continuous monitoring phase. So roughly speaking, as long as the right PCLs are in place and there's good existing need and all of the information is in compliance and clear, and you're relatively low risk without any kind of FOCI, for example, would be, or cybersecurity vulnerabilities, it can take on average 45 days. But if it takes 46 days, don't tell them, well, Zach said.
We have one more question in the room.
Real quick, is DCSA looking at CMMC during the FCL process? Meaning, are they taking that into account before issuing? And if it's not already in place, are they making that a mitigating factor?
So I'd have to look at CMMC. So I don't think CMMC is officially out there yet. Last I knew in the last NDAA, it was being looked at in terms of impact to small businesses. But without a doubt, cybersecurity and compliance with the NISPOM in particular, which has a lot of the CMMC requirements within it, is certainly being looked at without a doubt. So Not a hard yes, no for sure, but you can be sure that even if CMMC isn't out yet, a lot of the factors within CMMC are being addressed within that stage.
Zach, we certainly appreciate it. And by the way, what I did was Google DCSA small business, and yes, it pulls right up, and there is the email on how to contact the DCSA small business office. So just letting you all know, that's an easy do there if you need to talk to Zach. So, so anyway, with that, we're now going to transition over to, how the Air Force, right, and is looking at FOCI from a similar perspective. And we have Luke Walter from AFWERX, and as I've said before at the beginning, AFWERX has definitely transformed the SBIR program, right, into something that really is meaningful for the Air Force and how we transition technology. I always say this, story as he comes up here. I started years ago. I was in R&D at the time. I get a stack of SBIRs and I award them as a trainee. I didn't know what they were. And next year, another stack would show up. And so really, we just super excited that both AFWERX has done with that. So another
We need a minutes break or.
Just keep folks with them, if you need to take a break, go ahead and go. If we, we're good. Just keep on going.
All right. So this is kind of just one page. My presentation is relatively short. But the reason we're doing this is because intellectual property theft is a massive concern, right? So conservative estimates put it at 225 billion a year is stolen by our adversaries, mainly China. There's a great report by the U.S. Trade Representatives called the Special 301 list, which as you guys are doing your own reviews, I would recommend looking to understand what countries represent the biggest risk. Some of them may surprise you. But this step goes upwards of 600 billion sometimes each year based off of the value of the goods. So include counterfeit, but mostly increasingly becoming intellectual property and technology theft. These adversaries, as are laid out by the law, are probably pretty known to you. The big four, we have what's at the bottom: China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran. And based off of the law that came out most recently, the 27 June law, the SBIR and SCRM Extension Act, every federal agency is now required that executes SBIR and SCRM is required to do a due diligence program focusing on these four major risk factors: foreign ownership, which includes control and influence; employee analysis, which involved understanding the affiliations that key owners and covered individuals have; patent analysis; and cybersecurity practices. And the way AFWERX does this is through a partnership with other Air Force offices, such as the Commercial Office of Commercial and Economic Analysis, OSIA, and the Office of Special Investigations, OSI. Something that is unique to AFWERX and generally the SBIR and SCRM program at large, which a lot of people who've maybe done due diligence, risk analysis, contracting before don't really comprehend, is this number right here. We do this at scale and speed that requires automation, commercial data sets. It's not this one analyst, one company kind of review, because we're looking at thousands of applications in a given year, typically within a couple of weeks sprint. Go ahead and slide ahead. Again, this was the SBIR and SCRM Extension Act, in which our authorities to conduct due diligence derived from as public law 11793. And again, focusing on these four main countries, but something to point out is, there is caveats for foreign countries of concern, which are designated by the Secretary of State, which means a large number of things with its focus on intellectual property theft. So exposure to other countries listed to these four are evaluated in a due diligence program. It is not simply these four. Again, primary focus is on foreign ownership, control, and influence, and we look at that through various things to include your capitalization tables as well as affiliations that employees have. Often looking at research institutions of these principal investigators.
We all know that the Chinese in particular, but other foreign countries use academia, use these kind of pseudo prestigious conferences to advocate, to collect sources, to gain access to intellectual property. I mean, if anybody's actually pitched to a venture capital firm, right? Often it's like, hey, can you send me a deck? Or can you send me some information prior to that? I mean, we know that, I mean, that's just a great, easy, passive collection opportunity for anybody interested in intellectual property. We know that it is being done constantly. So looking at not only the foreign ownership, but also the affiliations that people have, how they conduct their patent analysis, where they're putting them, where countries have terrible IP laws. If your patents are out there, that is a risk that maybe we're not willing to accept, as well as your cybersecurity practices, which are really being touched on by DCSA. Next one. Another component to the law, beyond the law to understand, is most recently in the DFAR, there was published information that everyone needs to apply to needs to understand, and that is their foreign disclosure. Looking at these, I won't read them to you, we're all adults and you can read, but this is a requirement that is new. And I want to make sure that I really emphasize this because a denial of award can occur by not disclosing or not conducting the paperwork appropriately. So I just want to make sure that we really point this out, that DFAR listed above is new. It came into effect, I believe, in May or June, and it does require you to disclose foreign relationships to include JVs, subsidiaries, venture capital, essentially giving your cap table, as well as understanding the affiliations that key public individuals have. Next one. All of this comes together to inform a decision. Due diligence is not like the last step, that it has to clear it before it goes out. It is one of many factors that goes into evaluating a proposal, right? I mean, if you have a great proposal and the risk is there, it's kind of a juice worth the squeeze kind of thing. And a lot of those factors include overseas businesses, parent companies, subsidiaries, affiliations with these talent programs, or just having owners or covered individuals that have foreign affiliations that might cause, a conflict of interest, may create duplicate activities, right? Like why would we do open a civil solicitation that has high risk when maybe you're one of 4 companies already doing that, and the other 3 companies don't present risk. And something to kind of point out, right, is like in all general laws, the catch-all of like, hey, just goes to national security, right? These are the criteria that are really evaluated that are written in the laws on how and why the denial of award may occur. Something that is really interesting as well is violating federal law. Put it this way, like we have seen entities that, whether they know it or not, have connections to sanctioned entities. They have affiliations with people that are barred from doing business with the U.S. government. And those are factors certainly that come in. And I think it's factors that small business concerns should certainly evaluate within their own cap tables and relationships. All right, so I wanted to set the stage with the law and kind of just say that's the law. That's what gives us the authority to operate. And the way we do this is, as I said, a partnership with OSIA and OSI. So because of the scale and speed in which we operate, AFWERX, the team, part of my team that conducts this mission, is they are essentially being that case manager, if you will, working with our ventures team who manages the solicitation cycles, and they manage the relationship and process between OSIA and OSI. We also provide, a really crack team of former investment bankers and other commercial due diligence business analysts really understand how to find good information out there. And we provide that final lens and assessment based off of the inputs provided by OSIA and OSI. And how this works is OSIA receives all the SBCs that are applying, and we have dozens of data sets that we use, and everybody gets a full review using commercially available information. Pitch books, CB Insights, Dun & Bradstreet, and then just other tools that we have that go and scrape using large language models and natural language processing to scrape the internet for as much information as possible. When there are certain indicators, like, oh, there's some, we found some risk, indicators that require a little bit more in depth. That's where we bring in OSI, who has that manpower, those analysts, to provide kind of a more white glove touch, if you will, to the background to really make sure that the data set were correct. The data that we're using is articulated in a manner that we can present an argument to understand the rest of the report. When that all comes together, my team sits down with Colonel Lee or his delegated authority, since Colonel Lee is Air Force's Chief Commercialization Officer and is responsible for the execution of all civil and civil funds. And we walk through the evaluation, we walk through risk, and we make a decision on, hey, this is worth it. Or does he meet the criteria of denial of award? And is this something worth doing? So I'm going to pause there because one, I kind of realized I was talking fast, but I kind of realized this might be new and maybe a little starting and even scary, but like and while it is fresh, I will say like overwhelmingly statistics that we have gathered show that, chances are this really isn't something you have to worry about. I mean, most SPTs have strong, they're US companies and strong US relationships. Very few of them have these ties that have even been flagged, and even more to the risk level that we say is unacceptable. I don't have the hard numbers, but it is not as nearly significant as one may think. So I think the risk that you as small business owners may face with this is mostly focused on complying with the requirements rather than having a hidden Chinese, IP spy in your midst somewhere. So I just wanted to kind of alleviate concern with that, because as I said, the numbers have been relatively small from the small samples that we've had in the last 4 months. I'll pause there and see if you have a question. I'll pause there.
So in the center program, you're required to bring in university partners.
Yes.
And a lot of times, some of the university professors are foreign nationals.
Yes.
They have graduate students or foreign nationals. How heavy does that play into when you're doing this analysis?
Yes, so it is primarily when it comes to research at institutions, primarily focused on what we call malign foreign. Go back a couple, we'll have right here. Foreign talent recruitment programs, and inherently having a foreign national as a principal investigator or part of the research team is not disqualifying. In fact, it is who that person is and the affiliations that they have, right? I mean, if this is a known CCP member who is, had ties to the military research institution back at home and still publishes there, or the guest lecturer, like, that might be something that I'm here to heard about. But if they are simply a Chinese foreign national who's been living in the United States for 7 years and is working for their PhD program, like, not necessarily, no. And that is why I caveat, like, this is at scale using commercially available information. In that example, it would come up. You take a more thorough look at that and come up with context to help us understand.
The projections that you are making, what's the majority calls for them?
The majority is ownership and affiliation, foreign ownership and affiliation concerns. We have seen investors that have ties to sanctioned entities. We have seen people who have, it's mostly trying to make sure I stay within appropriate bounds, but it's mostly ownership, control, and influence concerns based off of LPs that may be foreign nationals that may have board seats, right, that can influence or have access to information.
Okay. No, Mike.
Okay.
You're that good, I guess.
I do have a question. Is, when I remember in 2019, I went to an event, one of the pitch days that were here locally at downtown. and downtown. And several firms came up to me and described where I would say Chinese financial interests were attempting to buy into their inviting them to Beijing, etc. Have you been? We've talked a lot today about the an ownership or something that's. But are you seeing if where there's financial interests like in the investing in venture firms or et cetera, they're embedded within that are trying to attempt to infiltrate or?
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you're a barred, sanctioned, or Chinese military industrial entity, right? Like, you're not going to be directly invested yourself, right?
Right.
So, they, through intermediaries, especially these large venture capital funds, private equity funds that are trying to do business in East Asia, we have seen that has come up several times. And generally, what we need to evaluate is, obviously, when that occurs, the foreign nationals will usually have a board seat or be a limited partner. Depending on how that structure is firm, that partner may not be within this funding investment vehicle or not, right? I mean, the venture capital firm has several investment vehicles and not all of them have the same venture or the same LPs. So we need to evaluate who these LPs are and what their connection is. And we have approved companies that have direct investment by Chinese companies, but if we look at it and understand that, hey, it's a small investment and a majority shareholder, they don't have undue control or influence, they don't have a board seat, right? Like, these are things that we say, hey, listen, they took a couple million, that's 2% of their cap table right now, like, and this company and the foreign nationals don't have access to the IP, they don't sit on board, like, those are risks that we run at. Like, we understand that Chinese money is out there, we don't want to stifle the US saying you can't take it. We're just concerned about the protection of the IP. Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's not a disqualifier.
Qualifier, right, but you're looking at the nature and the extent and
Yeah.
the ultimate their control. There's what we've talked about today is actually that influence control that stakeholder has.
And I certainly think there is a time lag kind of component to this.
Mhm.
You know, tech's opinion on China in 2018 is very different than it is now. US government's decision, I mean, we're now, with the increased CFIUS, which I just came from.
Right.
And with our new outbound
Yeah.
investment reviews, like, clearly there is a policy shift. And so, like, taking that same amount of money in 2023 is probably gonna be looked at a little differently than.
And sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
It would be, because it's interesting because we're hearing more and more about the Chinese economic issues, right, internally at home. And just, have you seen any difference in behaviors like in investment that recently, has it changed since like the 2018, 2019 time frame to now, or is it just only increased?
I think it's the point that you pointed out is the use of these foreign firms that have offices at home or it's right. Yeah, I think that's primarily what we're seeing is maybe not direct investment, but using larger pools that they are invested into or consortium investments as opposed to these large investments.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. We did, and I think you were in here when I was answering, but I just wanted to make sure did I answer some of those questions regarding SBIR and ability to participate in the SBIR program? It has to be a US based firm, et cetera.
US are primarily 51% owned and owned by US people. So yeah, I mean, so if it's 51-49, it's probably good to go, right? Yeah, especially if it's the British one. That's what it's got. And there is a limitation. I can't remember the actual statute, but you can have venture capital, right? SBIRs that used to be blocked to venture capital, but that has changed where I think certain percentage of SBIRs are now be spent on firms that are backed or maybe will be on operated by your pieces. So those exist as well.
And if you have it'd be a good chance for you if you have any other questions on your your situation. Yeah, address those with
specifically on, you know, the kind of due diligence that these. Okay.
Well, our local hub is
Yeah, just down the street.
right down the street. Don't know the address, sorry.
Monument
Monument Avenue. And that's-
2 blocks.
Yeah, where Carly resides, it's where my senior advisor who can answer questions, Mr. Matt Howard.
Okay, we can connect you.
He's a local resource for all of that. due diligence.
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
That's perfection. Okay. Thank you. I think it was a relief, you know, to hear, you know, from AFWERX, right, that they're looking at this, you know, very logically and looking at the actual situation and how it's being implemented. And, but anyway, now we're going to transition over to Mr. Mike Cooper. And Mike is part of the SCRM team here at Headquarters Force Materiel Command, and is a wealth of knowledge of how SCRM is being implemented and executed by the Army. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you. So, thanks, Jeff, appreciate it, and Stacy, thanks for having facilities like this. It's the 4th time I've been in this facility, second flight, so it's awesome to be able to have a space where you can do things like this, especially to be connected with so many people online. The previous climate that we did actually did end up in some business being done, not directly for us, but through friends of friends. So these are worthwhile endeavors to go through. First things first, I will never go last again because most of my slides have already been seen one thing before. And probably by the people that are experts on it. So all I can do is be remedial in my description of the slides. Those unclassified, and keep it that way. If you ask me a question, I can't answer on the slide. So, SCRM, when we talk about FOCI, that's the really the interesting and the fun part of the job. I call it the boring coding portion of the job, because that's what everybody wants to talk about, right? It's the cloak and dagger where we talk about peer adversaries. And so it becomes a really important portion of our business. And as you can see, there are so many other categories that we worry about and we go and investigate in supply chain risk management, that FOCI becomes one portion of it. Now, it can influence all the other categories, and quite often does. Talking about economics, FOCI usually has a big impact inside of that. But today we're going to focus in on what we look at. FOCI, I'm going to do it in the context of not just small but large businesses as well, and where we see those influences go. And sir, to your point, talking about a multinational corporation, and how does it play out? Like, is it empirical or is it, you know, a spectrum? I'll tell you, it's a spectrum. It really is. And if you're asking an individual question, if you're saying, well, what about this particular instance with my location? It's all managed within a total portfolio of risk. It depends on the requirements owner and what they can stand. So you come and you present a risk among many. They look at it inside of the portfolio, what can be mitigated, what is left over as a residual, and what is their risk appetite. That's what it really comes down to. So if you're on a unclassified contract or going after that kind of work, it's a different risk appetite than it would be for a classified contract where you need a clear facility. And if you are providing different classes of supply, that might be different as well. If you're providing subsistence that's going to go directly and feed troops on the front line, they may look at you in different categories of risk, may weigh heavier than they would say for me, where you're delivering material that's going to sit on a shelf and storage. So next chart. So this is a deeper look at our FOCI and the type of things that we look at and some of the activities that are done inside of our supply chains to help us understand where that influence goes. This is one of my favorite ones over here, weaponized mergers and acquisitions. It sounds really cool. What is it? And well, it's not just a regular merger or an acquisition, it's a targeted merger and acquisition with an agenda behind it. And you'll see that often happens from our near peer adversaries. And so we want to talk about it from the context of, it doesn't always come from a company that has the name China inside of it. Now, I do have an example in here where the company does have the name China inside of it. And I'll tell you, rule of thumb, if the company has China in its name, you should believe them. That's probably where they're at, it's probably who they're involved with. However, if they don't, you might hear other names that go out there and sound really cool. They may be incorporated in a place like San Francisco or New York City, but you don't have to stretch very far at the surface to find out they're a wholly owned subsidiary of a state-owned entity or other Chinese entity that's out there. And it's not just China, it goes into Russia, where you could have banned oligarchs. We have some pretty strict rules on that right now, given the conflict that's going on, or any of the other conflict nations that we are concerned with. So weaponized mergers and acquisition is usually after one of a few things. They want to get your intellectual property, mostly because they want to take it and use it. They want to be able to insert themselves within the line of supply so they can squeeze it off, or they want to put themselves in a position to learn more about the supply chains that are above or below them. So if you go and you think about a weapon system, a large one, think about one that flies around, it's called like an F-15. They're probably not going to buy in at the major subsystem of an F-15. They might, you never know, we have ejection seats and things that come from foreign countries. However, as you get further down in the supply chain, we say it's okay. It's not really easy to see. So you may be able to see who's selling you those subsystems. You may even be able to see those line replaceable units, the big chunks, or the secondary replaceable units, the little chunks. But when you start getting down below into things like piece parts, circuit cards, things like that, you don't always have that clear vision of where they come from. So that is where a lot of this activity starts to happen. They go in and they get bought into that area. And as they go through and work it, they say things like, hey, for my next tire assembly, in order to better serve you, tell me how that thing operates, what its operating parameter, where it's operating at, what altitudes, what heats, does it manage anything thermally, so I can give you the best product possible. So you can have something where you're like, hey, listen, I'm just a domestic board manufacturer. And you could be approached by somebody that says, hey, we're really interested in your business. You're thinking, great, I'm going to cash out, make a little coin, put it in my pocket. And they'll say, but we want you to stay on and advise. You can work yourself into a position where all of a sudden you're working for a nation state, right? So, but want you to know about things like that. Want you to know about different kinds of industrial espionage that happens. You might have a joint venture. That joint venture, let's just talk about China. There is an estimated, I think, $20 trillion of anticipated spend in the next decade coming out of China. That's a lot of money, right? There is 1 billion people that are consumers, some of which becoming more affluent because of what they do, that are looking for US goods and services. So it's a market that is very, very appealing. And not just for small businesses. If you take the top 10 DoD defense contractors and you just pull their 10 things and you say, who is doing business in China, you're going to find almost all of them through extensive joint ventures, both through commercial and quasi-military applications. Think about communications or control and things like that. So you find out that if I am somebody that is in a publicly held company and my due diligence or my fiduciary duty is to derive value for my shareholder, and I'm not looking at China, then I'm probably going to lose my job, right? So they have to go and access it. We understand that it is appealing for any company to be able to access that level of spend and that many customers in one shot. What you should know is that it comes with a couple of hooks. One, you won't just do business in China. You won't be able to go and open up a shop. You'll probably be required to have a joint venture with a Chinese company. You probably will not be allowed to take your goods made anywhere else in the world and sell them in China. You will manufacture them onshore in mainland China and sell them from there. And it'll probably have a name on it that's not yours. Maybe it's a co-branded, maybe it's a little different with a joint venture name on it. But the thing that really gets you is that they're gonna use your intellectual property to do it. So if you have the secret sauce and you have something really cool and you don't want anybody else to know about it, and you want to access that market, understand that you're going to willingly give that over to a Chinese company in a joint venture in order to manufacture and distribute your goods in mainland China. And it might be worth it for you. If your business goal is to make money, if it's to service a large customer base, it might be worth it to you. But I'll tell you, it's like all the three gentlemen that have up here before me, it will affect your ability to do business with the US government, and in particular, the Air Force. So we're not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, make your business decision and understand that going down certain paths will prevent you from doing business with us. In addition, there are things that can happen when you go out where you might get into a trap, right? So there are particular ways that usually get stuck inside of that joint venture with no easy way out. So we just want you to be aware that as you're going out and doing it, again, you don't have to believe me. Go out and look at it. I mean, you can find it. I wish I could say that the biggest tool that we use inside of supply chain risk management is the super fancy system that's on the high side. And just, no, it's the internet, right? And you can find a lot of information out there that a lot of people will willingly disclose. You just have to go out and look for it. So understand, we know there are business decisions that need to be made, but any of this could possibly happen and then go and taint your ability to do business. So here's just one state-owned entity. So you remember what I said? What does this mean? Right, so it's a state-owned entity. That's a company that is really governmental in nature. And you can see all of the different subsidiaries, major segments, and country that they're located in. Does anybody want to take a guess what that flag means?
They're operating in that country.
They're operating in that country, our country, right? And so you're going to see an example here in a moment of somebody that is. So whether it's uncategorized or all other, make sure worry about this, automotive parts and equipment, this country, trading companies and distributors, this country, aerospace and defense, this country. Well, Air Force is aerospace and defense, right? So we have to be very wary of where those touch points come from. So, and again, there are many state-owned entities. This particular one appears on many restricted entity lists. What does that mean? It's a list that's been put out inside of the Code of Federal Regulations, cut through usually one of the appropriations acts that goes through. For us in particular, it'd be the NDAA, right? The National Defense Authorization Act. There's a whole bunch of numbers out there for defense, 889, 1237. That list is going to be populated. 1268, 1634. There's new ones like 5537. I'll memorize it because it came out this year. But there's a number of them out there. And then Department of Commerce has their own lists. And then Department of State has their own lists. And you'll see many of these appear on all the lists to say, hey, just to let you know, that's not a normal company that's just operating like you can see here in the United States. It's actually coming off of the government itself. So when you see this relationship and it goes out there, you might say, well, Mike, I can be more savvy than that, especially if it's this easy to figure out. They're just going to tell me what it is, and we can tell you, yeah, a lot of times it will, sometimes it's not. Sure. Here's one where it wasn't. Company over on the left, founded in 1972, sold to a private equity firm, right? Makes some money, gets some capital, makes some investments, and then 2015, their stake sold to AVIC. AVIC is the one we saw on the previous chart. What does this do? You look at it, it says a private US owned and operated company producing fasteners, also some POL stuff, some bearings, and some other related components. But what is it really? When we have to look at FOCI, we say it's a wholly owned subsidiary of a Chinese state-owned aerospace and defense conglomerate headquartered in Beijing. And it's overseen by the State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission of the State Council. That is a very long way to say it's overseen by the Chinese Communist Party. Becomes very important to us, but there was an intermediary step that ended up going over. So understand when you make those business decisions how they can affect you, right? So don't always look and see what happens right on the front page. You have to go and dig in just a little, but once you dig in a little, you can take the plan. Next slide. So you guys have day-to-day practices. I'm not going to roll over all of these, but where can you get into some FOCI issues? And some of them aren't really obvious. You're advertising to fuel growth. Attended this defense consortium. I support the F-22. I do this, I do that. You lay it out on your webpage. You're basically giving an advertisement to be targeted. That's an opportunity for somebody to target. You think of it in terms of what is the opportunity and the like, right? You come back and you say, hey, I'm looking for some financing options because I'm ready to expand and I need a way to fuel it. And lo and behold, a white knight comes out of nowhere offering you a premium, the best financing you've ever heard, because you advertise that you support the F-22. That's another place that you can get in trouble, because if they give you financing and you give them an ownership stake, you're going to start saying, hey, we can't do business like that, right? Because now you're part of that state-owned entity. Responding to our changing customer expectations and demand. I need something that comes in cheaper and it comes in faster. And I don't have the manufacturing capability, but lo and behold, there is a slow boat in China that can come in with circuit cards or whatever else that I need. And I become a fabless designer, right? Which sounds really cool. But because of where it's manufactured and come in, that goes into the formula as well. Or even something as simple as I've outsourced all my back office needs, IT, payroll, human resources. Where is that work being performed? Who has access to the knowledge of all of your employees that are involved in our business? All of that starts going in. Now, on any of these, is that an automatic, hey, just because we can't do business with you anymore? No, but it does go into the formula, right? And it's not a pure formula. It's not like I assign you points. It's not like a video game. You're reaching for the high score. That's not how it goes. But when we look at the work we want you to perform, and we see certain risks that go along with it that are directly in contrast to what we're trying to accomplish, then we have to weigh in what we can do with that. Are there possible mitigations that we can use to lower that risk, or are there not? And if so, with the residual risk that we can hold our risk appetite, is it something we're willing to deal with? So a whole bunch of things on there to look at, where when you're joining us, just to remember. Now, previous discussion from AFWERX said, for the most part, most of you don't have any worries. Most of you are going to go and do your normal business, and it's not going to be a huge deal, right? The question comes when offers come that are better than they should be, right? Or you get an approach that somebody just flat out tells you who they are and what they're going to do. If you go and you look at on the previous slide of Line Aerospace, you'll see a testimonial on their front page that said they provided us with the financing and the know-how that we needed in order to expand our business and yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's a really good testimonial for it. Doesn't help me, right? But it helped them. So good on them, right? But understand that is something that you need to look at. Next chart. So where can you go to get help, right? So first things first, we talk about how do I understand what FOCI is. You got some great references that were given to you by DCSA, and they're really at the forefront of the FOCI discussion. You can always go to the small business, but if you want to look it up and read it yourself, whole bunch of listed references that are here, including some of the NDAAs that I told you about before, and a number of executive orders that have come out, list of DFARs and items like that. I think we send these charts out, don't we? Yes. Right. So you'll be able to hit the links for them. Pictures of links don't work. Sorry. But what might you have? Where else can you go and look? Well, some of these are pay for play, right? None of grad students. You might already have it if you do peer-to-peer lending. right? If you're extending terms and you're checking out other people you're doing business with, understand they have other products that'll help you with it. It'll blow through the entire subsidiary tree of a major corporation and tell you where they sit. And how the relationship is. It'll tell you things like who the major providers are, who supplies them, who they supply, those kinds of information go out. If you do a whole bunch of work in the financial sector, Capital IQ is really great. It goes out and it'll even get down to the point of telling you where first and second rounds of funding were done from venture capital, who those venture capitalists are, and how they were laid out. That's great information to have. And even just being able to go into Cage, have a Cage code, type it in and it'll tell you where they're headquartered, what kind of company they are, what kind of goods they normally provide. But don't stop at those. Like I said, Google is your friend. And if you have different browsers, different lookup capability, all of those are good to go and look. And the thing is the same thing that we do on our side. I always tell our analysts, go down the rabbit hole. Usually that's where you're going to find it. You start scratching at something, you go, isn't that interesting? That's usually the thing you need to dig into a little bit more. Usually that opens up a whole new universe of information you understand. Now, you might be like, Mike, hey, that's great. You tell me all this great stuff and understanding how to do it, but we're really here because we want to make some money, right? And I totally understand that. And Jeff, I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. If you understand FOCI and you feel like I'm a bit of a buffoon up here trying to explain it to you, you have a novel solution for uncovering FOCI and FOCI concerns. And I'm not talking about going to Dun & Bradstreet or Capital IQ. We'd be interested in talking to you. And if not me, I have other friends that would also be interested in talking to you. So just as a course, because it worked so well the last time we were here, if there is somebody that is out there that says, I already got this figured out and I know how to do it, and you have a solution, I would be interested in talking to you. Now, for you, those of you here, I'm interested in talking to you too. You don't have to, right? You don't have to. I'd be happy to talk to any of you. But that is a particular solution that we would be happy to hear about and understand how you do it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's it. Do you have any questions?
I think we have one online.
Yes, you do.
Do you have a question, Vern?
I have one. I'm just curious. Apex accelerators, we have a lot of small business clients. I've seen over the years, I mean, we have Barry, we have Buy American, but you can always get a waiver, right? You can get past them. They can be mostly manufactured here. Are we doing anything but the current goods and place within the government and looking at what could be potentially harmful or a risk there?
Yeah, tons. Boatloads. It consumes most of the. So I'll start with the Barry Amendment, the Buy American Act, and the Trade Agreement Act. Right, all those sound really good. Right. But ultimately, when you get down to it, it's 51% of the cost. Right, and if it's TAA, you can be TAA compliant, never have that thing manufactured in the United States, because depending on the class of good, it could be done by another country that we have an agreement with that is as good as manufactured in the United States. Right, so we have a lot of education that we do that says just because it says TAA, Buy American, or Barry Amendment on it, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get what you think. If you think that's the blanket of protection you land there at night, your feet are sticking out the bottom. So are we doing work and looking at that? Yes. Do I get calls every day where somebody says, oh, can you tell me it's made in China on it? Yeah, every day. Do we go out and do due diligence on individual companies or entire supply chain ecosystem? Yes. Is FOCI a large portion of that? Absolutely. But we also look at a bunch of other things, TMS and obsolescence. We go out and look at things like climate impacts, everything that goes along from economic to financial, the general terms that are going on and the way that markets are swinging, as opposed to the individual financial positions of companies themselves. Yeah, we look at all that. That front one that showed all the different areas on it, there's one that's missing, bonus points if you can tell me what it is. But as we go through and look at all of those, there are things that naturally gravitate to the top, right? So Earlier, Jeff was talking about weapon systems. We always talk about the sweet ones, right? F-22s, F-15s, F-16s, A-10s. You got all the heavies if you like flying low and slow. You know, tankers, if you're a tanker guy, I guess. But what it really comes down to is that we have weapon systems that, so I was in the Army, and to me, a weapon system was an M4 F-16. And they were like, hey, I have this weapon system, like, what kind of ordnance does it carry? It's a server with an antenna pointed at the sky. That's not a weapon system. Doesn't shoot, doesn't drop bombs, won't kill anybody, but they are, right? And when I go and I talk to the F-22 SPO, or I talk to the server looking at the sky SPO, they have two very different concerns, right? They are all interested in all the categories. The ones they're mostly interested in different, right? So when they do their pick from list of what's most important to me, and we look at everything, but we really dig deep in the things that are most interesting. It's the ones that are most tailored to their weapon system solution. That's your question, sir.
Oh, yeah, completely, appreciate it.
Is there a question online?
Yeah.
I'm just,
Did you type it in or something?
no. It's not my question. I have one.
All right. Are the submissions required by DFARS 252.204-7000 disclosure of information, which is a post-award requirement, ever bounced against the pre-award FOCI information?
So I think that they're reaching back to the previous one. And do we bounce those against them? I personally do not. So I'm pretty sure someone does, because that's all part of what we do inside of that DCSA internal intellectual property information protection loop, right? So thinking DCSA extending down through security and understanding facility. So for me, if we're doing due diligence and I want to know if you have a facility clearance, I don't call DCSA, I call my IP folks. And they look into the same systems and can tell us whether or not there is one there. But we don't extend them. We don't accept them. DCSA does all that work. So is somebody looking at it? Sure, somebody's looking at it. Because who has two thumbs and isn't looking at it? This guy. But we do have.
I think, you know, in that question, it's really asking, and the person online can correct me. Is they're asking, you know, if I've, you know, indicated, you know, where my sources are or what in the pre-award, right? In my certs and reps, but then afterward that changes, right? And then who is bouncing that off? And it generally, you know, number one, it's incumbent on the contractors, and at that point they've received the award to notify us when those things change, right? But yes, there are people looking at that, obviously within the program offices, et cetera, that would be, you know, interested in that. But of course, there is, like, in those instances, you know, responsibilities of the contractor, the prime, to be, you know, revealing when their sources of supply have changed, and there may be a risk there.
Well, I'll tell you, bad news ages like milk. Right, bro. If you have something that's changed, go ahead, being proactive and discussing it. It's way better than hoping that nobody finds out, because that's when people find out. And non-disclosure is way more punitive than voluntary disclosure. If you don't believe so, then just go out and look at any of the self-identifications of people that have ITAR restrictions. Right, go to the Department of State and look at the difference in findings between self-identified ITAR restrictions, violations, and the ones that they found out. And you'll see it's like orders of magnitude worse, right? So in general, and no promises, in general, in the government, self-disclosure gives you a workable relationship where they can possibly build mitigations and get you to a point where they can tolerate the risk. Non-disclosure usually puts you a post on the other side of the table. It's really difficult. That's Mike's personal opinion. Haven't seen it 100 times. Good rule of thumb. Bad news ages like milk.
Mike, I had a personal question as you're going through this, and like, what is what do you feel like when you're looking at this script? Because when I look at it, and I'm not, at all, I just see some, the briefings and the discussions, I look at it, gosh, it's just so overwhelming, right?
Yeah, it can be.
Right, and so, what is, when you would, if you were like looking at something that was like, if you could solve, like, what is your biggest thing you would like to see solved in all of this,
So for us, when it comes to FOCI, and this is, we've gotten really good at finding what we find. Right, and you might make that's an obvious, that's a good comparison, right? But the concern is, have we gotten really good at finding the easy stuff and we haven't even found the hard stuff yet? Right, that's why we're saying we're looking for novel solutions that will indicate FOCI that we wouldn't normally have discovered on our own through the normal measures that we do. And I have a lot of friends, by the way, that would be interested in that as well. But just to understand that as it lays out the line, that goes through all the categories. So SCRM as a practice in the commercial world has existed for a very long time. And we have had requirements within the DoD for quite some time as well. Go down to ICT and looking at program protection plan requirements for components and CPI. And then it goes out and starts going through 4140 for material deliveries, and then it zips into the cyber ODI and starts talking about cyber SCRM. You can see the evolution that's come over time, and we're doing our best in the Air Force to lean really forward. I'll say it in the foxhole, but there's no foxhole in the Air Force. But we lean really far forward in that foxhole to start creating the tactics and techniques that we need in order to figure out where this stuff is. We're really blazing that trail as we go. So when there are great solutions that come in, and again, coming out of this thing that we did last year, there's a couple of things that we're working on right now that came out of it. It's real. Like I love this forum because real solutions come out of it. So if you have one, I'm interested in hearing it. I wasn't floating it's not a softball. It's a hard nut to crack, but if you have a way to crack it, I'm interested.
Do you have time to talk about it today? Novel solutions or?
Yeah, I always have time to talk about novel solutions. Well, it depends when Jeff lets me off the clock.
No, I think that's great. You have any, okay, so we're good. Thank you, Mike. Well, what I like about, is our the SCRM team's willingness to really hear what can be, what is in the realm of the possible, right? And I will say, like I said earlier, when I first, one of those very first events, I point to Luke here because it was the AFMC pitch day back in 2019. And I was hearing from several firms about this kind of like overt, interest in them from foreign entities that we may be concerned with. I don't hear that as much now. So I think there's maybe, as you're talking about here, we know, but they can, if they're really interested, they're not going to act in the obvious ways, right? And so I think that's what's important for us, right? Is to really understand, have we just scratched the surface, and is there something more going on that we are not yet aware, or has tactics changed in that regard of how they're operating? So anyway, now our final presentation is the discussion by Billy Grill, and many of you in the local area know Billy Grill. He is our Apex Accelerator. And I'm gonna let Billy say his title. It's a long one, and pardon me, it's a good one. But anyway, he's a star player in the area here. We should talk about resources available to you here in Ohio. So overview, Billy.
As you can tell by my questions, I'm not a pro. I don't play one on TV, don't act like one. I'm just up here to let you know about the Apex Accelerator. We are currently a part of the DoD Office of Small Business Programs. A lot of you here are our clients, a lot of others are our partners. And that's really how we operate, through partnerships and I always like I said, if I've got a guy, I got a guy who's got a guy, because we have to do that in this space. There's no way we can know all of this in the ever-changing landscape. But overall, as a resource, things like certifying in SAM.gov, you are representing and certifying to the best of full knowledge of your company's standing and some of your statuses. So we help you walk through that. And I love the disclosure. We help you work with your contract officers, we help you work with your small business growth, your other resources to navigate this space that is constantly getting more muddy and more gray as we speak. Everything from that conversation through a CMMC program that we offer through OU University or Ohio University to get you ready for that next step after this 800-171. So we help you become ready for some of these standards and mandates. I always like to say educate, inform, and prepare. We educate you of the current standard, we inform you of upcoming changes, and then we prepare you for success. So just kind of wanted to put my pitch up here and muscle in on just time a little bit at the end. I know it's late. I know you guys are probably thirsty. You want to hang out with Jim. But we wanted to just offer us as a resource. My data consultant is Bondo in the back row. Raise your hand, Bondo. Everybody talk to him. Afterwards, he is your man with the plan.
He'll buy a beer.
He's buying a beer too.
I got someone else's credit card, but I got it covered.
Overall, we're a resource. We're here to assist. We're happy to answer any questions. If you are outside of the state, I know we have a lot of virtual attendees. There's a Apex Accelerator near you, 300 nationwide, operating in Guam, Virgin Islands, and all the places I want to be. But there's definitely someone near you. We have a global reach to localized support. And the best part of it is we don't cost anything. You've already paid for us with your hard-earned taxpayer dollars. So with that, I'm taking it right back to Jeff.
Hey, Billy, could you just touch really quick? I know we talked about before, and it was brought up, CMMC, the free consulting.
Yeah, so our CMMC program, right, you have NIST 800-171, that's your current standard. You have your 110 controls, getting it SPRS. The upcoming standard, CMMC level 1 and 2. We offer a program where if you come in, actually, Lee's a part of our program, but those fall. How do you like the program, Lee?
It's great. I'm almost done.
She's a rock star, right? Small business friendly. So basically 15 free hours if you're CMMC level 1, that gets you through your basic controls. That actually by default makes you compliant with basic safeguarding of CUI for your contractual terms that you're signing if you're going on contract with DoD. Level 2, a little bit more expansive. That's 65 free hours. Again, readiness consulting. They're not going to come in and implement. They're not going to build your architecture for you, but they will help you understand and control how to meet that and what they're looking for from an auditability standpoint. So, looking forward to any questions. We can always sidebar later, but definitely some resources available to you guys if you need it.
And that's offered by every Apex Accelerator.
No, thank you. No, just Ohio right now. There are other resources. So if you're in Michigan Cyber Defense Center, they have a similar program. I believe the VA has one that's run through their SPDC. Arizona, I believe, has some. So we're all kind of cats and dogs here, trying to get to the same goal, which is reducing the barriers to entry and the cost of entry for small businesses that want to enter the defense industrial base. And we're kind of your tip of spear, bringing you in, getting you ready, educating you, but also developing these great resources, making you aware of the standards and getting you procurement ready before we have you talk to great champions inside the fence like we do. So if you want a conversation, more than happy to help. Bondo's here in Dayton. I'm kind of all over the place, but overall, you can get a hold of one of them. Even if you have to bug Jim for my cell number, I'm sure he'll give it to you. So yeah, appreciate your time.
Really who?
So we have one more question. It's directed for Mike.
Well, I thought it was, but it's not.
It's
a CMMC.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Bill, hang on a second.
Oh,
You have spoken about the vulnerabilities and threat assessment. What level of security do you think is the best?
I don't know if that's region.
I don't know. It seems like it'd be a CMMC question, like.
Vulnerabilities and threat assessment, I mean, CMMC is really a self-assessment.
Yeah.
You're talking about this even for 171. I mean, you know, the CMMC from a threat assessment standpoint, you're really talking about right now, what's your SBIR score? And you can actually, I mean, you can fulfill the mandate of the NIST 800-171 standard just by having a scoring. It can be negative. As long as you have a project objective and milestone sheet to get you where you need to go with this. And we can help you walk through that standard. We can recommend outside resource, we can recommend internal resource. You know, Project Spectrum, Kelly Kieran, Blue Cyber, it's pretty all of them. She is a great resource around that subject. But that's kind of, we act as that belt right? Yeah, it's really about getting you to the right space at the right time to help you efficiently grow and navigate.
the other thing would be just to contact my office.
Yep.
The email is in the flyer that you provided, if they're not over here, so. Okay, with that, it concludes today's event. I thank all of you that attended in person, everyone virtually as well. Thank you. If you have any, follow-up questions, Mike is here, get with Mike, but, if you don't have an opportunity to talk to him or have something to follow up and think of later, you can just go through me and I can connect you with Mike and Sprint team. If you have any questions about AFMC, see myself afterwards, Ryan Evans, he works with me right here in the front row. We can talk to you about what's in our pamphlet, how to make further connections within the Material Command. Otherwise, thank you for attending today's event and thank you.
I always do. After sitting here. Really got out loud. Yeah. If you can. Want to make sure you get. Yeah, I want you to put it down.